Late at night, the desolate Budia train route cuts through total darkness and relentless rain. Over the span of a single month, 4 women have boarded this exact train and never made it home. The police reports detail a highly specific pattern. A group of serial killers are operating on the late shift, actively hunting women who travel alone. Their method is brutally simple. They overpower their victims and throw them from the speeding train cars into the ravines below. Knowing all of this, a young woman paces an empty, rain-slicked platform at 1:45 a.m. Economic necessity leaves her no choice. If she misses this train, she waits until morning. She has to clock in for her shift, forcing her to actively step into what is effectively a hunting ground. After midnight, this public transit route ceases to be a utility. Law enforcement vanishes, the crowds disappear, and the moving train becomes a sealed vacuum where predators operate entirely unchecked. She boards the train and steps into a dimly lit, completely empty carriage. The silence immediately emphasizes her isolation, but her paranoia isn't just about the empty train. A month ago, she was sitting in this very carriage when the first murder occurred. She watched the entire assault unfold from her seat, and out of sheer, paralyzing fear, she remained completely silent. This diagram illustrates a psychological phenomenon known as the bystander effect. It shows how the presence of other people creates a diffusion of responsibility. When multiple observers witness an emergency, each individual assumes someone else will intervene. Because everyone waits for a cue from the group, nobody acts at all. Sitting in the quiet carriage, her eyes land on a discarded newspaper left on the floor. Bold headlines document the string of murders she watched begin. The sight of the ink triggers an intense wave of post-traumatic stress, sharply escalating her panic. She is trapped between 2 distinct breaths. While a physical predator stalks the tracks outside her carriage, her own past inaction has locked her inside a psychological prison of guilt. The train grinds to a halt at the next station. The doors slide open, and another exhausted woman, likely heading home from a late shift, steps inside and drops into a seat right by the exit. Right behind her, 2 men enter the carriage. Heavy scarves conceal everything but their eyes. They step into the aisle and immediately lock their attention on the new, vulnerable passenger sitting alone by the doors. The protagonist watches from a few rows back, her heart racing. The setup is perfectly mirroring the nightmare she witnessed a month ago. The predators have isolated their target, and the physical distance between them is closing fast. The mounting panic overloads her nervous system. She slips into a state of deep dissociation, her eyes shutting as her mind retreats into a stress-induced sleep. Behind closed eyelids, she begins hallucinating the impending attack, hearing the new woman desperately begging for her life. The environment has reconstructed the exact conditions of her trauma. She faces a strict moral test: physically confront the killers to break the cycle, or remain a silent bystander while history executes its inevitable loop. She violently jolts awake. The attack is no longer a hallucination. Across the carriage, the 2 masked men have lunged at the woman by the door, and a physical struggle has broken out over the seats. But the expected victim behavior completely vanishes. The woman by the door doesn't cower. She pushes back with sudden, lethal precision, turning the tables on her attackers. The brief brawl ends abruptly when the woman reaches into her coat, pulls a concealed firearm, and aims it directly at the 2 men, forcing them straight to their knees. Seconds later, 2 previously hidden police officers emerge from the shadows of the adjoining car. They step right past the armed woman and formally place the struggling killers in handcuffs. The case of the Commuter murders appears perfectly resolved. The police executed a grounded, tactical undercover sting, placing an armed officer as bait to catch the predators in the act. The train slows, and the officers escort the handcuffed men onto the next platform. The doors hiss shut, leaving the carriage dead quiet once again. The protagonist lets out a massive exhale, relieved that the nightmare is finally over. Still catching her breath, her gaze drifts back down to the scuffed floorboards, landing squarely on the discarded newspaper that had fueled her panic all night. Look closely at the black and white portrait on that crumpled page. It's an obituary for the very first woman thrown from the train, and her face is an exact, flawless match for the woman who just held the gun. There was no police sting operation. The local authorities never solved the case. The violent arrest was orchestrated entirely by the vengeful spirit of the woman who died on these tracks 30 days ago. The supernatural logic dictates a grim reality. When human justice systems fail entirely and the living choose to look away, the dead are forced to return and engineer their own retribution. Staring at the newspaper, she finally understands the gravity of her complicity. Her silence a month ago acted as the catalyst, birthing the vengeful spirit that was forced to return and finish the job she had personally failed to stop. Ghost stories and urban legends rarely exist in a vacuum. Sociologically, we create these supernatural narratives as a mechanism to process our collective guilt. They are the stories we tell when society fails to protect its most vulnerable people. Everyday apathy allows predators to thrive in the shadows of our cities. But the unbearable weight of that collective guilt guarantees that the ghosts of those we ignore will always find their way back onto the train.